Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Tuesday, June 19th, 2018. I hope everybody had a great weekend. I know we took a few days off, but yesterday was kind of unplanned. I think the family might have suffered a little bit of sun poisoning. We went out on Sunday and enjoyed the beach for a couple of hours, and we couldn't have been out there no more than 2.5 hours. And everybody pretty much got sunburn. I think I actually might have got a little sun poisoning. Myself and Mari both actually felt fatigued, nauseous all day long. And so being in that water with that sun reflecting down and also just being in direct sunlight. Now, I have a history where I don't usually sunburn. And I probably should be wearing some kind of sunblock out there. But just from my previous summers, like I said, I don't usually sunburn, and I will definitely wear some for the rest of the summer, as we spent maybe 2.5 hours out in the sun. And like I said, I'm pretty sure 2 out of 4 here at least got some sun poisoning of some sorts. The kids, we were safe with them. They both got sunblock, and of course everything's fine with them. So lesson learned, and those UV rays are no joke, folks. Take a look at our space weather conditions right now. Looking at our sun, the solar wind speeds are still elevated at 508.7 kilometers per second with a thick density of 15.2. Now, right now we've got 2 sunspots, 2713, which is Earth facing and turning away, but as well we have 2714, which just began, is growing right now, but there is no threats for strong solar flares. Sunspot number 28. So it's been a little while since we haven't seen a sunspot, but interesting conversation I had with a friend of mine in our GSM Discord chat. And we were talking about last year, August and September, when we had the active month of sunspots, big ones, and X-flares, and just, the correlation between the sunspots and the hurricanes Harvey and Irma, that, in my opinion, we saw some TSI decreases as well with these sunspots, and who knows? I can't prove it 100%, but I believe there's some kind of correlation between storms like Harvey and Irma with sunspot activity and everything else that comes into play. But the interesting thing that we're lacking this year, and I'll speak more about this here in a little bit, but the water temperatures, of course, in September, you're in the peak of your hurricane season. So in August and September, sunspots may have a little bit more to do with the intensity of the storm, say if this was September. So interesting, just kind of compare. Obviously, this is a lot weaker situation, but there is some uncertainty still about how long that system in the Gulf Coast is going to be there. So we'll get into that later, but I thought I'd make a mention real quick that we've had some discussions about sunspots and storms, and also we have another one coming over the limb. I'll show you that here in just a second. Our KP indices are at a quiet 2. Yesterday we were at storm at 5, barely a 5. So 24-hour max now is at a 3, so no storm conditions for us. And looking at the SDO, we have a very weak corona and possibly a coronal hole situation up here in the northern region. This is just weakened corona. This is not a coronal hole. Up in this region right here, it's going to be kind of similar to what we just went through, as the coronal hole that we experienced the solar wind through was actually in the northern section as well. And, we saw wind speeds top somewhere in the upper or mid 500s. So as we take a look now, and this is the region I was speaking about too, here is another active region we've got popping over the eastern limb. Keep an eye on that as well. This one, though, right here, AR2713 is starting to decay, and then you see 2714 kind of just explode into a little bit of growth, but I don't think a lot of forecasters are expecting that one to stick around. There's the coronal hole that we had the solar winds from. Here's a new one forming right here. It doesn't look to be too much more than what we just had, so I'd be surprised if we didn't have some more solar activity by the 22nd of June for a minor G1, if any at all. And speaking of TSI, take a look at our last reading that we've got here, and this was the date of June 11th, 2018. we're looking at a reading around 1360.6990. So again, we're hovering in that 1360.67 value again. And let's get on to a few articles. I wanted to point this out real quick. Energy grid crisis point as power prices surge 160 times the usual rate. Now, this is in Australia. Remember, folks, they always say what we get in the south, in the southern hemisphere, in the summertime, what they get in their winter is what we could expect here. Now, last winter, I know folks here in the Northeast, we faced a similar situation where right around the middle of December, we got some very cold air, and then it went from very cold to super cold from Christmas and through the first week of January. So now we have several major electricity power stations that went down on Thursday night, unprepared for a spike in demand caused by a cold snap along Australia's east coast. Again, similar situation. This is early winter down there, and like I said, we were facing an early winter at our point. Normally, we don't start seeing this Arctic kind of cold air that we saw last December until around late January, early February. It forced one of Australia's largest aluminum smelters to shut down its pot lines for an hour at a time to help keep the state's lights on. On 3 separate occasions, Tamango, the state's largest single energy user, was forced to halt production as spot prices soared to a staggering $14,000 per megawatt hour. CEO Matt Hell tells Ray Hadley the price hike would be like a motorist paying over $400 a liter for petrol and would have seen business lose like $5 million an hour. So $400 a liter of gasoline, I know they pay by the liter, we pay by the gallon here in the United States. But I think it puts it more in perspective when they compare it to a business losing $5 million an hour. That's unheard of. What we need is energy supply, a constant one. The question is, when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing, where does that energy come from? Now, he sarcastically mentions about how they could spend all that money on a giant Tesla battery, and he said the largest battery in the world, ... would power the smelter for about 8 minutes. It's clearly a nonsense, and it is. So now we're looking at, once again, the power of coal. That's right, folks. I said it. The power of coal. And it says here, at the end of the day, you have a spare tire in the car for a reason. We need a spare tire, and it's called coal-fired generation. And that's true. And I know a lot of you crazy nutballs out there that believe in man-made global warming are going to say, oh my God, he's going to tear up the planet. This guy here is a crackpot that wants to see the world melt its ice caps and all this coal. That's what it's going to do. It's going to put more carbon in the air, and we're going to see more global warming. And it's just, sea rise on everywhere and whatnot. But let me tell you, so far, all these accusations of man-made global warming, and it's falling apart. In fact, a friend of mine today was telling me as well, he believes that the global warming man-made argument is on its last breath. And I think he's right. More and more information that's coming out on a daily basis. It was just like today, earlier, I was on a Facebook post for a local meteorologist who claims that the ice in the Antarctica is, and it's melting insanely levels, which I reported on last week. And this gentleman, I'm getting trolled because I made a comment. I showed the stats of how only 0.011% is melted in the last 25 years. And this guy, of course, he starts calling me names. And I come back and I just say, listen, instead of name calling, because he bets I'm a guy who believes in the 9/11 conspiracy and the government did it and whatnot. This has nothing to do with conspiracy theorists. This has everything to do, and I told this guy, I said, if you just take the time to Google and research, do your research. I've done mine. You'll understand where I'm coming from. Now, I should have put a shameless plug into my show, but, we have enough trolls on YouTube, so I'm good with that, and that's pretty much why I censored him from joining us. But the whole point is that coal is what kept the Northeast from having blackouts. And I'm going to tell you something. It would have been freezing cold for us to have a blackout for any period of time, whether it was for an hour or a half hour. It got brutally cold in a hurry out here, and there was one day where Mari and I were busy not only heating up a building, but taking blow dryers and doing everything in our powers to thaw out water pipes, newly renovated water pipes, I might add, in a building. And it took us a good 12 hours to get that done. So, I'm never going to forget this year's Christmas, the snow we got, the cold we got, the warnings from the gas companies telling us to take it easy on the usage. And then I find this story here in Australia, and how ironic. Their early winter, they're having the same situation that we already once had this past winter. So I guess the next question is, are we going to have another repeat of last winter where we got the colder air a lot earlier? We'll have to wait and see. Now, I know myself and others, we've talked about the warm weather that we've had here in the States the last few days, and I think a lot of us expected to have a hot summer. With all the temperature variations that we've seen, and it's been extreme. Henrik was telling us how hot it was. I mean, boiling hot. He's cussing up a storm about how hot it is. And then just yesterday shared with us that it is somewhere in the 14 Celsius mark, which is about 57 degrees Fahrenheit here in the States. So he went from summer to late March, early April-like temperatures. And snap of a finger. I'll leave the link in the description. Again, I believe in coal, and I do believe that we're going to see a huge uptick in coal people using coal in the coming future. They're not going to have any choice. It's going to be that or freeze your ass off. Breathtaking river of lava gushes from Hawaiian Kilauea volcano as more homes are destroyed. Now, Mari and I, we've been off a couple days, so I know that everyone's seen the video where it shows the lava just going a million miles an hour. And the update on Sunday was that advising that the volcanic activity was producing large amounts of dangerous gases and ash into the air. They advised residents to remain indoors. Now, this was part of my problem with this drone footage that I believe I showed you guys on Friday. And towards the end, it shows the glaze that comes from the lava entering the ocean and the amount of smoke. Here's just a still image of that fast-moving lava river here. Once you guys have seen the video, I'm sure you have. But the amount of smoke, the amount of ash plume that we are seeing from the lava entering the ocean, and I'm freezing up here, so bear with me, folks. You gotta love technology and live shows. Here we go. Am I gonna get that? I was hoping that this. Here's some of what I'm talking about, but this is nothing. This is not. And I want to point out right here, guys. There is lava flow right here entering the ocean. Look at the amount of this. So that's what I'm more worried about, is this laze, this gaseous plume that's getting thrown into our atmosphere. Oh boy. Thank you for that update. Beautiful music. Let's go ahead and pause that. Sorry, folks. We've seen some outstanding pictures, I tell you that. That's for sure. And this video is kind of a recapping of what's happened over the past several weeks. Still, I know for some it's still a nightmare, and it's got to be a dreamlike scenario. But I will find some footage for you guys, by the way, that will show you the amount of plume, the ash plume that we're still seeing from the lava flow into the ocean. It's outstanding. And it's also keeping things really dim there as well. I noticed the cloud coverage, or should I say the ash plumes everywhere, that are blocking the sunlight and definitely affecting the climate there. It talks about the destruction of Hawaii comes as Guatemala struggles to recover from an eruption of volcano fire this month that killed at least 110 people and left about 200 people missing. Hate to be a Debbie Downer, but that number will probably go up in both categories. And the only reason why they're mentioning both volcanoes in this single article is not to overhype this, but I think there's an undertone here that this is not a coincidence. There's going to be more of these eruptions. And who would have thought that we would have seen these remarkable pictures continue on going in through June, possibly into July and August? Hail takes a toll in southern Manitoba crops, and it says here, this says recovery depends on the extent of damage and crop stage. Some farmers are reseeding. And just to give you an idea, here is the hail. And I'll tell you, this hail right here with the spikes on it, this always makes me wonder, what if you got hit in the head with that? I mean, you got the circumference of a golf ball, and then you've got these death spikes. Ridiculous. Anyway, Manitoba Agricultural Services Corporation is still assessing hail claims from an intense thunderstorm that swept across much of the southwest, south-central Manitoba evening of June 14th. I believe we mentioned that as well. As of press time Monday morning, the MASC had received over 250 spot loss hail claims, and over 120 are receding claims, basically. So 120 plan to plant again as a result of this hail damage. Up to baseball-sized hail damage property and crops on June 15th. High winds knocked over buildings, grain bins, and trees, and a tornado touched down near Wascata. Back to the MASC, talking about it's always tricky assessing hail damage early in the growing season and so close to the June 20th seeding deadline, which, is tomorrow. So if we are getting those seeds in the ground, hopefully these people are working 3 shifts to get that done. We have had some farmers say their fields were so damaged it looks like they've been cultivated. And when you have baseball-sized hail, I can only imagine. Depending on the amount of the damage, some cereal crops can recover if the growing point is still below the soil surface. Ann Kirk of Manitoba's agricultural cereal specialist said in an interview on June 15th. In the case of wheat, that's before the stem elongation. She said a lot of wheat is already past that point. Corn growing point is above ground at least 6-leaf stage, she added. Cool temperatures are best for crop recovery after hail damage, but this week's forecast for temperatures in the low 30s. That's pretty hot, folks. That is, in fact, there's a lot of this area, too, that was in a heat advisory yesterday. So they were feeling the heat in this part of the country in Canada. Look at the image here across the fields as the storm is coming across. I'll go ahead and leave the link in the description. And let's talk about some floods across the pond. Unfortunately, once again, we are talking about India. According to Assam State Disaster Management Authority, over 500,000 people out of 720 villages in 6 districts have been affected. With all major rivers flowing above danger levels, the National Disaster Response Force and the State Disaster Response Force personnel had evacuated over 8,000 people from flood-hit districts. The government has now opened up 437 relief camps now, in which 159,652 flood-hit people are taking shelter. Additionally, 212 relief distribution centers have been opened up by district administrations. And here are some images of this flooded area. Again, more people have lost their lives in India because of weather, more than I can ever remember since covering this topic. The overall flood situation in the country's northeast continued to improve on Monday, June 18th, except in Assam, where 2 more people had died, taking the death toll to flood-related incidents into the 25s, or was 25, I should say. I'll leave the description and the link as well. It says over 5,401 acres of crops have also been washed away in flooding, adding that a damage to embankments, roads, and bridges was reported in several districts. What just dawned on me when I was reading about the infrastructure here in India is making me think of Houghton. And Mari, thank you very much, which we're going to switch gears real quick while I'm thinking about it. We had 60 sinkholes in this area in Houghton, Michigan. This is in the UP of Michigan. Now, yesterday, we got a line of storms that came through the Northeast here in Buffalo. And we watched it pour for about 2.5 hours. And what was crazy is that the radar kept updating, and the storm grew right in front of our eyes. Every 5 minutes, the update would show a more intense cell over us than what they originally had reported. So, looking at these pictures, guys, think about this. This is a street in a residential area. Now, this is also at the top of a hill. So you can only imagine how fast this water was rushing to cause this kind of damage. And of course, when we're talking about flood, you're talking about your homes. Look at this. The water, obviously moving some appliances around inside the homes, just rushing through everywhere. Look at this. This is not an area that's prone to this kind of flooding. That pretty much says, and that guy right there, let me say, that guy probably would have never imagined himself sitting on his Corvette like that. I mean, this car is worth a lot of money. At this point, that doesn't matter. Now it's about living. These pictures are awesome, and I don't mean it that I approve of destruction, but they are a huge eye-opener, and the water's gone. I mean, this is a case of what fast-moving flash floods can do. I mean, look at the asphalt, guys. It looks like it's been melted. Everything's been jacked up as if they had an earthquake. Now, the sinkholes, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure someone will, but I'm almost positive these sinkholes are from areas that maybe have seen dry conditions for a very long time, and then you get these sudden rushes of water, moisture that come through, and all that weight and pressure from the top of the soil, well, underneath is dry if it hasn't had moisture for so long that it creates these pockets. And that's how these sinkholes form, is that all the weight from the water on the top of this fall through as the dry soil underneath is deteriorating away underneath as this rain was happening. So when you see this many sinkholes, this many area, I mean, good Lord. This is just an area that's, the power of Mother Nature, the water, extreme power. I see pictures every day on Facebook with, especially in the Italy area, Romania. You see photos almost every day where streets have turned into rivers, and you see people driving down these flooded roads, and all of a sudden their car just lifts up from the ground and starts floating away uncontrollably. I think that puts it in perspective right there. We saw the picture from the top, and here we are at the bottom. Mari was looking at this, and the infrastructure damage is incredible. How long are we going to be talking about the recovery here? How long are these roads going to be closed? How long is it going to take to get cleanup crews out here, to get the mud out of the area, to get the water? I mean, this is not get a couple dump trucks out here and pour some gravel. This is a complete overhaul of the landscape. All of this is going to have to be removed. All that pavement, all that sidewalk, everything. Then they're going to have to regrade the roads and then refill it and then, of course, pave it. Now, just this one alone, I can only imagine how many months it's going to take. But some serious damage, and I know this was something that happened over the weekend, but when Mari found these pictures, I thought, wow, this woman took over 200 pictures, and she lives, this is all within the vicinity of her town, and she didn't have to go very far. But just utter devastation here. And I'll get through a couple more. I keep thinking, what's worse? I've seen it all here, and then you keep flipping through and you see worse pictures. And this is happening everywhere, guys. Not just in the U.S., but India, all the areas that we talk about. We're seeing scenes like this everywhere, especially in India, Turkey, like I said, Italy, Romania, those areas we've seen. France, we've seen floods there. The list goes on. And just another example of the sheer power of Mother Nature. I can only imagine the billions of dollars that we're going to see in repairs here. Billions. And this wasn't even a hurricane. This was all by the power of waters and sinkholes. Look at this. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know how close I'm standing to these sinkholes. And who's to say the rest of that road doesn't give way? These are massive amounts of land that are missing now. I think I actually rifled all the way through them. Let's go back to more flooding, and this one's in Myanmar, or Myanmar, however you pronounce this. Heavy monsoon rain triggers Mon State's worst floods in 40 years. Hundreds of people were forced to flee their homes on June 17th, as they were swept through floods in the Ma Liming and other townships in the Mon State after several hours of heavy rain. Floods and landslides hit the area before dawn, submerging homes and roads, locals describing as the worst floods in over 4 years. It says most of the areas are flooded, such as the Thrili Minglar and the Thrili Myling. Several other districts as well. Normally, some quarters of the town would flood, then the tide rises in, but this time it was only about the tide. It was also about the heavy rain, and the drains were also overflowing. So many factors here. More pictures from the flooded area. You know, we started seeing tragic pictures last summer, actually, from this area where religious temples were falling into the rivers. The rivers were overcoming the banks and creating erosion along the banks, and some very old historic buildings were lost. Now, I know one that we showed last year. I remember it very well. Mari made a video for it, and it looked like an older building, but they had just rebuilt it, and not more than a few years later, it's in the river. So unfortunate there. Link in the description. More floods killed dozens, displaced more than 1 million in India, Bangladesh. Was this the one story here? I think it is. Flash floods triggered by heavy rain, monsoons in South Asia have killed dozens, displaced more than 1 million, most in northeast India and Bangladesh, authorities said on Tuesday. Says here that, this picture here is not showing up for some reason, but it's a gentleman who used bamboos to make a makeshift river. Flood situation remains critical. It says here that referring to at least 10 of the state's 32 districts, the weather office is forecasting more rain and thunder showers in the next 48 hours. Not good. The floods have killed nearly 20 people and displaced 800,000 in the Indian states of Assam. Now, we just got done talking about that. So you combine that with the downstream in Bangladesh, 11 people have been killed and more than 250,000 have been displaced. So over 1 million people now have been affected by the rains in this area in just a short several days. Last week, landslides and other mishaps triggered by rains killed at least 12 people in southeast Bangladesh, including 2 it says Muslim refugees from Myanmar. Once again, we have them in the headlines. The camps thrown up after estimated 700,000 fled from the Myanmar military crackdown on insurgents that began last August. Don't get me started about what the government does to its people there in Myanmar, okay? And to read this military crackdown on insurgents. Yeah, forget about the fact that they're going through some life-changing floods here. I'm not going to get on it right now. Don't want to become too much of a Debbie Down. It's Tuesday. We're supposed to be happy. But there are some regions of this world that are not handled the way they should be handled, and that's unfortunate. 15 dead in Ivory Coast floods. Again, out here, this is African news. I just wanted to report quickly. It says rain poured down from 11 p.m. Monday night to 6 a.m. Tuesday, causing flash floods up to 2 meters deep. That's over 6 feet, folks. Rescue teams saved 115 people, and searches are underway for other casualties. So this is something that's still unfolding over there, and pretty fresh. I just wanted to quickly mention that as well. Severe thunderstorm warning for parts of Salt Lake City, quarter-size hail and 60-mile-per-hour winds. Now, this was for over Sunday, but I wanted to mention it because we also saw large hail in Colorado, and more of the same here in Utah. Very briefly discussing the hail. The warning was issued at 10:45 a.m. Damaging hail and wind were expected. And, of course, some of the hardest hit areas was West Jordan. And here's just a brief picture of what we saw as far as hail. Ping pong ball to big marble size. Nothing too bad. But when you put that on top of the hail that we've had in Colorado, and also I read the other day that we've had over 12,000 insurance claims for last week's hailstorm as well. So that number continues to go up. Here we go. Heat and humidity ease northeast. I had a stormy weekend. Now, as I mentioned earlier, guys, when it says cooler and less humid, this ain't no joke. This green shadowed area here has been pushed south. That was over us yesterday, and these storms raced through one after another. And like I said, we saw rain from 4 o'clock until 7:30, almost 8 o'clock last night. And it was, for the most part, 75 to 80% of the time, it was pouring pretty moderately. So we had lots of rain. Thankfully, no big flooding. Quickly ran off, but we hadn't had any good rains like this in a while. So that's probably why we were able to handle that in our drains. But it says temperatures are projected to be within a few degrees of average for the rest of the week in New England and upper parts of the mid-Atlantic beginning on Wednesday and farther south. I say that's begun today. Temperatures today are absolutely amazing today on the western New York side. Average highs in this time of the year range from the middle 70s, New England in the middle upper 80s, in eastern Virginia. The coolest nights in the pattern will be across New England, where temperatures will dip into the 40s, across the northern tier, and the 50s farther south during the week. Most substantial slash of humidity has already occurred much of the New England, upstate New York, according to AccuWeather senior meteorologist Brett Anderson. Farther south, humidity levels will retreat from their early week highs through the middle of the week. Humidity levels will bounce back in the mid-Atlantic, with the most noticeable uptick in humidity in New England this weekend. Downpours to focus on the mid-Atlantic first and then spread northwestward this weekend. And here it shows on Wednesday, nice dry pattern here for the Northeast. Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, West Virginia. You guys, once again, are going to see torrential rains to an area you were soaked last week with several storms that rolled through. We have more rain coming in. I'll leave the link in the description. This is this weekend, and I did see this briefly too. We do warm back up, and as we get back into the 80s by the end of this week here in the Northeast, we are going to get more humid, and they are calling for rain chances all day on Saturday. So it does look like a washout for us here in the Northeast for this weekend coming up. So enjoy this beautiful weather. Less humidity, temperatures in the lower 70s most of the week. It's going to become very moist and humid once again towards the weekend. Speaking of moisture, tropical disturbances soaking Texas with drought-easing rains, but flooding is also a concern. Now, I briefly talked about, in the beginning of the broadcast, about sunspots and their influence on our weather. And last year, how in August and September, we saw 2 massive sunspots and 2 X-flares for really a month, where it was a kind of a surprise where the sun just woke up for 30 days from late August and through late September, where we saw this increase of solar activity. And we also saw Harvey and other hurricanes that developed rather quickly than once thought. And we're kind of watching this situation right now here in Texas. And the reason why I'm saying this is because just for Monday night, Fremont, Texas has already picked up 11 plus inches of rain through Tuesday morning. Alice, Texas, which is about 45 miles west of Corpus Christi, has seen about 9 inches of rain as of 10 a.m. this morning. So here we are, 1:30. That was the current radar. It's been an hour ago. And the concern is, will this thing continue to intensify throughout the weekend? We had a gentleman who connected the dots a couple of days ago about sunspots and hurricanes and all that good stuff. And this person, in his beginning predictions, he was saying it was going to be a hurricane. But now, as the threat of hurricanes out of the woods, now we got to worry about these long-lasting rains that we're experiencing right now. I just don't think this map is doing it justice. This is just through Wednesday. But how long is this storm going to stick around? Some areas will see 5 to 8 inches of rain. Widespread area will see at least 2 to 3 inches of rain. Some localized areas. Houston, you're in that area. You're looking at anywhere from 3 to 5 inches of rain just through Wednesday. This is not including what's already fallen. I almost feel like going to the GFS now just to take a look since we're talking about this. Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. Let's do this real quick, and then I'll get to that. Yep, you've seen it all, folks. No to Trump's America. Now, listen, I had some people bitching about me politicizing or being more political than usual, and I'm not trying to make this a Republican-Democrat thing. I'm trying to point out that there are politicians in the White House who are trying to politicize this thing, who are trying to make it about Democrats and Republicans. Trump's administration, for the most part, there's people who believe in the science that we're doing over here in this community, Grand Solar Minimum. They believe in ENSO. They believe in solar activity. They just so happen to be Republicans. This here is probably one of the dumbest things I've seen, but this is also a very familiar situation. And I'll read this real quick, and I'll tell you why this is familiar for me. But the Sierra Club has a message for white Republicans who disagree with them on global warming. You're a racist. That's right. The U.S.'s oldest environmental group is pushing a recent study that claims high levels of racial resentment are strongly correlated with reduced agreement with scientific consensus on climate change. The percentage of white Americans who said that they believed in climate change is a very serious problem declined during the Obama administration. Why? Here's why. The Sierra Club is not the first to compare skeptics of man-made global warming to racists. It's a part of a larger trending linking environmental issues to race. Former Vice President Al Gore, we all know him, repeatedly compared the climate crusade to the abolitionists of abolitionists and civil rights movements, implying their opponents are pro-slavery, anti-voting rights forces. This is disgusting. I brought it up because it reminds me of a situation a couple years ago. We had a researcher in our group, and we had another researcher in our group who was very, very knowledgeable about Grand Solar Minimum. And these two clashed once they brought up their political views. Now, the one person was for the one president and the other was for the other president, the previous administration. Then that's when the racist comments came. And guess who the racist comments came from? The accusations. That's right, the Democrat. The Obama supporter who claimed that the other person was a racist because he supported Trump, and then linked it as well to everyone who supports global cooling is also racist because they support Trump. Obviously, that became a problem, a very sad one, because the researcher at the time did a lot of work for us, but we couldn't tolerate this. And when I see this story, it doesn't surprise me, because we've had this kind of behavior pulled on us several times. And like I said, this hit home when I saw this article. And it's unfortunate that once people discover your political motives, all of a sudden you become a racist. Whether it's for global... I need to stop saying global cooling crowd, because we're called climate deniers, apparently. I had a guy describe his research into what I do as a climate denier. I'm a climate denier. I was officially labeled a climate denier. And if they only understood the climate or the science of what goes into all this, they would understand that they're the ones that look like they have egg on their face, not us. Link will be in the description if you want to read this silly story. Normally I have an asshole of the week. I guess this is the asshole statement of the week. Take a look at our national radar here in the U.S. And if you guys pay attention up here, this is where we seen storms last night racing across western New York. And now we see them refueling and getting ready to head into those areas again, into central Michigan once again. Showers and thunderstorms in Iowa. This area has been pounded. And then, of course, we're watching this little development back here. Don't want to forget you guys here in Montana, Idaho. You had hail as well in that particular region. But yesterday, looking at this radar, we had moisture from St. John's, Canada, all the way to Portland, Oregon. Today, we see a similar picture. Not quite as widespread, but still rain in some vicinities that we had last night. The only difference is the Northeast has cooled down significantly since yesterday. Speaking of cooling, everybody, when I started doing the North Atlantic anomaly and watching that, well, here recently, the Starman did a tweet and put 4 of the Atlantic regions together, and they're all dropping in temps. So I want to show you this. Here we go. Let's start with the North Atlantic. Okay, so it's showing a consistent pattern, which I thought the new baseline was going to be negative 0.6. Okay. As of the 19th, we do see values climbing back up to the negative 0.52 mark. But for the most part, we've seen a continuance of baseline around negative 0.6. Well, look at this. Even the Gulf of Mexico, since June 6th, has seen a sharp decline. Look at this. A full degree in the Gulf has dropped. It is now beneath baseline. Okay? We have seen temperatures flirt with the baseline back in April. But here we are in June, guys. We should be heating up in this part of the region. And part of the reason why is because the waters around this are cool as well. Here we go. The East Tropical Atlantic SST. Also in the negative. A negative 1 below baseline. Now, to this, it hasn't been above baseline yet this year. But you see it trending downward since May 10th. Took a sharp decline. Tried to level out a little bit, got a little bit higher on the 18th, 17th, but on the 19th, it's trending back down. Here we are in the Caribbean, the CDAS Caribbean sea surface temperature. Once again, temperatures are down below baseline, around the negative 0.6 area. This one here, South Tropical Atlantic, this is even a little bit more alarming to me. Maybe Starman can help me with this one. Are they supposed to be this sporadic? Because starting on May 22nd, we had gained a full degree, dropped a full degree, and gained a full degree 3 different times since the end of May. So that to me looks a little off even, to see such drastic drops and increases in that. But, I wanted to point this out. No, this one's not below the baseline, but still, you've seen some dramatic behavior coming from these temperatures as well. And then we look at the CDS Atlantic MDR. Once again, that's been trending down all year as well and continues to do so as we are getting later in the summer. Not just by a little bit, but almost over a full degree in as little as 2 to 3 months. Here's the global. About the only thing that's over baseline. But this too is also trending closer. It is inching closer and closer to 0. So I don't think that I'm being a crackpot by saying that we're cooling when we've constantly preached 95% of temperature matters in the oceans, and the other 5% is atmospheric. And if I'm showing you temperatures here in the Atlantic and the Caribbean, and even the global values that are showing a downward trend, and we're in the heat of we're getting close to the heat of the summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, I don't think it's much of me being a crackpot. I think it's just a guy who's looking at the information in front of him and connecting the dots. I'm not fudging these numbers. I'm pulling these all for tropical tidbits. None of these numbers are being fudged. I can't manipulate this stuff. So where are you people at that are criticizing us right now? When this kind of information is being revealed, where are you guys at to talk about global warming and man-made and how we're going to be ice-free by the end of the summer? I've shown you the data. We are cooling dramatically, if you ask me. And we're not even the beginning of this minimum. This is like the appetizer of the minimum right now. What we've been going through since late 16 is the appetizer. I've shown you the data. I'll rifle through them again. Everything I'm showing you, for the most part, is below baseline. And if it's not, it's still showing erratic behavior. Especially this one troubles me the most. Starman, I'm putting a shout out to you, my friend. Help me understand why we are seeing such a huge increase and decrease in a short period of time when before that it looked pretty normal. It almost looked to me as if it was steadily moving up as we got into mid-April. And then since then, it's been crazy. Let's go back home a little quick. Take a look at Windy, our forecast. Looking at Tuesday right now, we see Houston. Tons of moisture still hanging around throughout the day. That storm is moving onshore. But look at the increase. Look at this. Okay, here we are Wednesday. Houston's getting it. Southern Texas is getting it. That becomes a little more widespread. And I don't know about you guys, but also I'm noticing not just here in the Gulf, but here, let me move this up a little bit so you guys can see. You can't see Southern Texas. But take a look here, here, here. The increases for showers and storms definitely goes up along this front. Once again, it's pushed down south a little bit. But as we move through the week, that tries to go back north again. Come on, computer. I guess it helps if I hit play. And again, Iowa sparking up more thunderstorms. And then look at Thursday. Again, another spin up in southern Texas where we see some intense rainfall in this vicinity. So now we're looking at Thursday. So the storm's been here since Sunday. Take a look at the 22nd. Once again, we see some intensifying happening again, but this is moving now to the west into the middle of Mexico. Thankfully, the most of that moisture has died off in that region. So interesting to watch the storm fade away into Saturday. And again, like I said earlier, we see the increase. Look at this. Increasingly chances for rain again in the Midwest into the Northeast as a huge system moves through the South as well, through Arkansas, Oklahoma, Mississippi. The Northeast, you're going to get moderate to heavy rain and redevelopment in Missouri and Arkansas, and again, Oklahoma throughout the weekend, Kentucky, Ohio Valley, also late in the weekend, and then right behind it as we start the work week, once again in the Central Plains, Nebraska, South Dakota, Kansas, heavy rain. So a very wet pattern here across the Central Plains, the Northern Plains once again, and into the Midwest as we go into early next week. And this low pressure system is trying to scoot on out. Once again, Michigan is in store, looks like, for another decent sized storm. This is the 28th of June, next Thursday, and watching this storm system move. Here's one thing I do appreciate, and if you guys noticed here, watching that storm come through Michigan and come into western New York, thank God for the cool waters of Lake Erie, because I do believe is the reason why a lot of this energy dies here is because lake temps are still not where they should be right now. And I think, believe it or not, with all the rain that we saw last night, we still probably saw a decreased version of that because of the storms going across Lake Erie. There were several lines of storms that did not make it across Lake Erie yesterday. And if they did, they were very weak in nature. Now, let's take a look at the GFS. A little bit different. Pretty much the same as far as we look at today. And moving into tomorrow, we see a lot of the same as we saw in the European model, the moisture moving into central Mexico. But the GFS has it going in a little bit quicker. It's not hanging around like it has it hanging around on the European model. Now, the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic are concerning to me as a low-pressure system. According to the GFS, is very bullish. We will see plenty of rain throughout the midweek, going into the weekend through the Ohio Valley. And like I said earlier, the plains will be fired up again with storms. And just lots of rain chances throughout most of the Atlantic, the Northeast, the South, even the Central Plains. Look at here. We are looking at Monday, June 25th. Plenty of rain chances still across the Central Plains into the Northern Plains, and going into the Midwest late week into the weekend of next week. And then right where we were talking about where the European model has this region here getting rain. So far, this is lining up with a lot of the European models that I'm seeing. But interesting here, and I want you guys to focus here at the end of the month. We must have another high-pressure system here in the middle of the Atlantic, because if you watch right in this area right here, and I'll back it up a few days, if you watch, the moisture is coming in from the Mid-Atlantic. That is moving east to west, folks, not west to east. So that high-pressure system will get pushed back out deep into the Atlantic eventually once a stronger low-pressure system comes across the United States somewhere around the, let's see. Looks like that low-pressure system right there on the 4th of July is what's going to push that high-pressure system. So for the end of June, though, we're going to see rain chances, but the moisture is going to be coming in from the east and not from the west to east motion that we usually see. Mari made a mention earlier about a possibility of a hurricane being fired up on the 29th of June. And right now, looking at the GFS models here in the 28th, they could be talking about the East Coast. And this was something that I saw too and wondered. Previous models had this storm forming closer to Florida and moving up the East Coast. But this here, and I'll go ahead and point out what I'm talking about here, this one right here. I may be wrong, but this looks like the system that they're questioning, and this is on the 28th of June. Watch it as it kind of moves towards the North Carolina, South Carolina area. Not very much to speak of right now. It does look like there's more development in the Eastern Pacific. Another storm raking the coast of the western part of Mexico as well. So, again, this is all in the future. This is 4th of July weekend, and we do see sort of what I would say a bit of a development right here. This looks like it gets a little bit more intense on the 5th of July. As you look here before those days, it starts to kind of get its act together and starts to form right around the 30th of June, and it comes into view right here. So it's kind of organized by the 3rd of July and gets itself really put together by July 5th. But this is still ways away out. Just, again, I like to show these long-term forecasts just for peace of mind, kind of give you an idea of what's to come. I'm always a type of person that likes to be prepared and ahead of the times anyway, so either way. All right, so that's probably going to do it for us today. I'm going to go ahead and check in with Mari, my producer. How was things today in the chat? Everybody getting along?
Everyone is absolutely wonderful, as usual. Another shout out to Michael Holiday, the Super Chat King. You know, thank you, buddy. And I just told him I'd send him a shirt because he, like, every time he goes in the chat, he, like, donates money. So I feel like he needs a shirt, a GSM shirt. So, and Starman's in there with his wisdom. Thank you, Starman. You're wonderful. Henrik's in there being Henrik. We love Henrik, too. And all the mods, everyone, wonderful people. We're lucky, Jake.
This is why I kind of like doing these 2 o'clock shows, because it gives the opportunity from our friends across the border as well to jump in and hang out with us folk here during the afternoon. It's evening for you guys, but usually when we go on at 8 o'clock, it's really late at night. And still, I get Starman and Henrik at times that still hang in late and show up for the chat. So I want to be fair for everyone and come up with a neutral time. I'm glad that everybody tuned in. Guys, we appreciate the support on this channel and your continuance patience with us as well. When we first started this, we always, from day one, especially back January of 2018, the main goal here in this channel is to report on grand solar minimum and bring you the facts, and then you make up your own minds after that. That's why we leave links in the description. That's why our website has sources that you can check for yourself. Guys, this isn't stuff that we're just whipping up and making up here, guys. This is all fact-based information, historical data, and I don't know how more obvious to be. I think the highlighter of the situation is when you look at these SSTs and they show you the temperatures are trending downwards. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us today. We'll talk soon. Stay tuned. We'll see you tomorrow.